It really is so great to hear what students can do with the power of TED-Ed, and this conference is just one example of the power that TED-Ed can have. Now, before we get to our main stage speakers, we'd like to introduce our keynote, Salimah Mussani. Salimah is currently the coach of the Canadian national women's golf team. Kevin Blue, the Chief Sport Officer of Golf Canada, has said that, quote, her impact on the players in the women's program has been evident since the day she arrived. As someone who knows Salimah personally, I can vouch that her energy is infectious and inspiring. And so, I'm happy to introduce Salimah Mussani to share with us her story. Please give her a round of applause.
All right, thank you, Armand, for the introduction. It's been inspiring to hear all the stories so far this morning, and I applaud all of you that have come up here to share. It's not easy, so. Today, I am going to stand up here in front of all of you, and by way of 5 life lessons, I'm going to share my journey in a career that has been always predominantly male. In the last few years, it has been reported by the PGA of America that for every 100 male professionals in golf, there are 10 female professionals. Fortunately, the golfing world in recent years is becoming increasingly diverse and more inclusive here in North America. My story ends here. Paris 2024, the Olympics. 3 months and a few days from now, I will be there. Not as an athlete, not as an athlete as I maybe once dreamed about, but as the head coach for the national team for Canada. Dream come true kind of stuff. And I'm truly humbled to get on that plane as a first-generation Canadian and don our Canadian flag. The underlying theme today is growth. There are some fundamental truths I'd like to share before we get started. Growth knows no boundaries. It recognizes no limitations, and it thrives in the most unexpected times and places. Let's set the stage. My journey began in 1993, well before probably all of you were born. Back then, it wasn't just a male sport. It was a white male sport. But then again, I was never like anyone else. I was a tomboy growing up. Those of you in the front might be able to see some of the small pictures I put in there of when, I wasn't looking so hot. But that's me being vulnerable. But back then, being a tomboy was a thing. Girls didn't play sports, and they definitely didn't play 8 sports. Those that know me well know that I'm a competitive human. To this day, I still love playing any sport. When I was forging my path and becoming a professional golfer, I loved being in the heat of the battle. I loved the hard work. I didn't mind failing. I guess I just liked growing. Back then, I didn't have Caitlin Clark to look up to. Most of these leagues did not even exist. It wasn't because women's sports was all over television. It wasn't because my siblings or friends were playing sports. It wasn't because it was the cool thing to do. So then, how did I get here? Lesson number 1, get outside your comfort zone. We've heard this message already today. At the age of 13, yes, I was competing in 8 sports, but golf wasn't included yet. That year, golf happened because my dad took up the sport on the suggestion of one of his patients. Doctors don't work on Wednesdays, they play golf. And so my dad started. I'd been to the range with him a couple times, and then we went on a holiday a few months later. A pro at the course by the name of Happy changed my life with 3 words. He saw me from afar hitting balls, found my dad, and told him emphatically, invest in her. Something about the way Happy said that to my dad resonated, and as they say, the rest is history. Within 6 months, I was competing in golf. Over the next 2 years, I'd won the Ontario Junior Championship and several invitationals. And by the time I was 18, I'd won 2 Ontario Junior Championships, 2 Canadian Junior Championships, and had competed in several international competitions. I'd grown up in Burlington, Ontario, and I always knew what was going to happen next. My next step in my senior year was to be the head girl at the private school I was attending, a school I had been at since I was 5 years old. A graduating class of 60 students. I knew everyone. It was then that my family made the ultimate sacrifice for me. We packed up and moved to San Antonio, Texas for my senior year. It's just so I could play golf for a full year and try to figure out if it was the sport that I really loved. At this point, all I could think about was how excited I was to go play golf for a year. I didn't realize that at that time, in the late 90s, no one looked like me. Nobody in Texas especially. Here I was being different again. I was now in a graduating class of 650. Talk about culture shock. But I was used to being different. I'd practiced my whole life. So I used this to my advantage. I may have been a fish out of water. I may have been different than everybody else, but I didn't think of it as a weakness. I just chose to work harder. Sometimes we have to take steps that make us uncomfortable to understand where we are and where we want to be. I left that year with a Texas State 5A individual title and several full scholarship offers for university. There we go. Lesson 2, obliterate obstacles. I chose to attend the University of Texas in Austin. My parents were now in San Antonio for the better part of the year, so it made geographical sense. I needed my support network around me. What I didn't anticipate was that simultaneously I would be diagnosed with a serious blood disorder called ITP. I had 0 platelets in my system. I want you to think about this. A high-level athlete who had just been diagnosed with a blood disorder, where had I been bumped, kicked, nudged in the wrong way, it could have been fatal. Yes, when this happened, it was scary. I thought I was invincible. I had it all planned out. But I quickly learned that life is fragile and that there are no guarantees. Within 12 hours, I was in the hospital, getting blood infusions for 8 hours at a time, days at a time. It was a temporary solution. The bone marrow test, however, confirmed good news. My body was still producing the platelets, it's just that my spleen was eating them too quickly. When the temporary solution wore out, my spleen was removed. Life went back to normal. My platelet count was back in the millions. I completed my freshman year in great health and ranked number 19 in the NCAA. Then something strange happened. Then something very strange happened. I couldn't get through workouts, class, practice. I just had no energy. It was not like me. It spilled over into many things, and life just wasn't fun anymore, and golf wasn't either. Despite everything, and there was a lot of everything, I played my first LPGA event that year in May, qualifying as a 19-year-old. The spark was still there, but I knew something wasn't right. I decided to leave the University of Texas for several reasons, and I took 6 months off to get my health sorted. I wasn't giving up on my dreams quite yet. Fortuitously, I was offered a scholarship to Stanford University in January. I felt I had overcome the obstacle, as well as the temptation to derail and give up, even though no questions were still answered about my health. One of the first things upon arriving to campus was a visit with the team doctor, Dr. Elaine Lambert. She called me in, ordered some elaborate tests, and 2 weeks later I was back in her office to declare 3 more words that would change my life yet again. You have lupus. Thankful in the year 2000, Google existed. I spent hours traveling down all the rabbit holes. Lupus is an autoimmune disorder where your own system attacks itself in any number of 1,000 ways, and that's what made it so difficult to diagnose. Also, there is no cure. But now, at least I knew. Lesson 3, love yourself. My journey from here was quite abrasive. The triggers for lupus are sun and stress, basically the tenets of my newly minted professional career. I graduated in 2002 from Stanford and turned professional right away. The experiences I had in this 7-year jaunt as a professional, well, they weren't all much fun, and they arrived furiously and often, but the highs, 11 professional wins, were well worth all of the struggle. I had good friends that took care of me on tour, that traveled with me, checked in on me, and helped to make it all worth it. I want you all to be aware that when you love something so much, you don't see the bad sides of it. This is going to happen in all arenas of your life, whether it's a relationship or a job. This is how we humans are built. And so, I loved golf. I was going to do it, despite the fainting spells, the doses of prednisone, the feeling of weighing 300 pounds, and not being able to get out of bed, the constant joint pains and aches. It was what brought me joy. It was my passion. It's what I started to dream about probably at the age of 15. Nothing was going to stop me. I was getting smarter. I was planning my week strategically between the balance of rest and competition. I was being smart about practicing when the sun was coming up and before the sun went down. My results were trending. I was having my best season yet. And then that same year, now we're in 2006, my only coach at the time, Leo Zampedro, a gem of a man, a friend, a fatherly figure, a mentor, my sounding board, the man I talked to nearly every day for 13 years, passed away suddenly while having a Band-Aid replaced on his back. What a great guy, and what a devastating blow. So now, what would each one of you do? I pushed on. I fought and fought, grinded it out, found a new coach, continued to persist against the flow of life. But it wasn't working. By the end of 2007, my health had deteriorated significantly, and I was being told the next step was to get on a kidney donor list. Reality hit pretty hard. Goodbye, professional golf. Lesson 4. Sorry, I realize these are getting like lower and lower, so I'm not sure you can see it, but lesson 4 is find fulfillment. But then again, here's life, right? Lucky me. I got to go back to Stanford and be the assistant coach. I did it for 3 years. I loved every moment. My body got a break, and my mind too. While at Stanford, I got to share my journey to the girls who were still trying to decide their relationship with the sport. Something I knew was going to be fickle, yet rewarding, difficult, yet satisfying, especially the longer you wrestled with it. I took this job mostly because it was handed to me. I wasn't searching for it. Sometimes we have to trust that others see things in us that we don't. We have to be open and willing to step out of our comfort zone. I could have said all sorts of questions when my playing career came to an end. Why me? Life is unfair. And I'd be lying if I said they didn't cross my mind, but I just didn't entertain them. Instead, I moved on. I rolled with the punches. I knew there was more to life than playing a sport. It wasn't my identity, and it never will be. I had to create my own life and face whatever the waves of life were going to throw at me. Having been a coach a long time now, I know the value of zooming out. Being able to see the big picture, going after the tiny wins, understanding that progress is never in a straight line. These are all really important lessons, especially for all of you here as you're embarking on the beginning of your entire lives. You'll be away from home, choosing careers, switching careers, finding relationships, breaking up, getting married, having children. There is so much more in store for each one of you. So keep perspective. When the going gets tough, keep perspective. Take moments to zoom out, and instead of maybe feeling sorry for yourself, ask yourself and figure out what is the lesson that I need to learn, or what is the change I need to make. In my case, it was to give back. I know that golf has given me so much. Life, lessons, friendships, trips around the world, scenery that's unmatched. The list goes on. So when I started coaching, I realized the value of giving back to the sport which had given me so much. Our final lesson is to reinforce relationships. Eventually, I moved back to Canada after 17 years in the US, and it was now January of 2013. I had studied to become a financial advisor. I moved here. I knew only a couple people in the city, and I wasn't planning to teach golf. I wanted a fresh start, and I needed to make money to live in this city. We all know it's not cheap. I started meeting people in my community first. We're a very, very fortunate group, bound together by regular services morning and night, and a safe place to arrive and be welcome and loved. Almost immediately, I'd fallen in love with the West Coast while I was in Stanford, and so despite not living at home for 17 years, there was no turning back. The person who convinced me to move to Vancouver insisted I give him a golf lesson. Talk about lighting a match. After 2 years of juggling the financial advising, where I had to chase after people and make cold calls, and golf lessons where the referrals just showed up, the scales had outweighed themselves, and I decided to drop the financial side without any regret or question. I knew this is where I belonged, growing the game of golf. 3 years ago, in the heart of COVID, a call came to my phone. It was from an old classmate at Stanford. He had just been hired as the chief sport officer for Golf Canada, and he wanted to know what I was up to. I explained that I coach now. Between the Stanford gig, an assistant gig at the University of British Columbia, and the 3 golf courses I was teaching at here in the Lower Mainland, I was confident to say that it was my path. He explained to me that an assistant position was opening up with the Canadian national team and that I'd be a great fit. And I thought about it for a bit. The job was a contracted position for 80 days on the road. Why not? I applied, 3 rounds of interviews, and the job was mine. 9 months later, the head coaching position opened to a global search. And of course, I threw my name in the hat. At that point, nothing could really scare me. Did I think I was going to get it? No. There had never been a female head coach. Did I think I could do it? Slight imposter syndrome. Was I willing to learn and grow? Always. Rigorous rounds of interviews, and the punchline is long ruined, because I celebrated 2 years this week as the head coach of the national team in Canada. I now spend 180 days on the road. But the real moral of this part of the story is a relationship. The ones from the past and all the ones hereafter. Who you know these days does mean something. A foot in the door, a reference, a good word. That's what you're building day in and day out, is your character. How you interact, how you communicate. Ask yourselves now, what is the basis of a meaningful relationship that you have today? Your community that you build is your asset. It is the meaning and will bring the meaning to your life. Remember these 5 lessons. I've made them in the tune of Golfer. Quite sneaky, right? I don't know if anybody picked up on that. But I'd be absolutely remiss if I didn't show gratitude to the people who got me here. My parents, they sacrificed everything. And their willingness to just let me be, it couldn't have been easy. My older brother, Ali Khan, used to drive me to the golf course. I didn't have a license. My younger brother uprooted his life at the start of high school to move to Texas, and then caddied for me my first 2 years on tour. Leo Zampedra, who I've mentioned, probably angel number 1. I'm convinced that he's encouraging me from above, and what I'm mimicking and exuding is it's from him, that I can say this is part of my journey. In the end, and on this theme of making waves, I want to conclude with this visual for all of you. The events in our lives are like waves in the ocean. You can't stop the waves from coming, but you can choose which ones you're going to surf. You can't choose the order of the waves, whether they're big or small, but you can choose who comes with you to the beach. You can't control the weather the day you go, but you choose how to prepare for it. Ultimately, the wave you focus on is what you'll intuitively feel in the moment. What you'll feel is what you'll act on, and what you act on is who you become. I truly hope each and every one of you are able to face the multitude of waves that challenge you in your own very unique way. And know that with each one that comes, you're growing. It's been my honor to spend this time with you guys today, and thank you to the entire team for putting this on, and I will now look forward to any questions that you may have.